In this episode, I'm joined by multi-award-winning international speaker and founder of Inspired by Publishing, the amazing Chloe Bisson. Welcome to the Empire Builders podcast.
Thanks, Nick. It's great to be here.
So, by the way, I'm not going to ask you any of the questions you're expecting me to ask you. You told me recently that historically you've suffered with like anxiety and like you used to be really nervous when it came to speaking. Why on earth did you decide to pursue a career as a public speaker, given the fact that you were anxious or fearful of doing that? How did that come about?
Great question.
What possessed you to do this?
So for me, when I started my business, I had mental illnesses in the past. So I had really bad anxiety, depression, as you mentioned. And the only reason I started a business was actually because if I didn't work, I wouldn't get paid.
Yeah.
And so if I wasn't well enough to work, I was like, I cannot constantly be trying to get sick pay, trying to live on benefits, all that sort of stuff, which I was told to do, which is another story. And so I thought, I need to start a business that brings me money, whether I'm there or not. So my original, if I'm honest, answer was to not be visible whatsoever, which ironically now running the business
it's like the complete opposite. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, but what I did was when I started doing that was I realised, yes, it was great having the automated income streams coming in and the money coming in, but actually the way to get the best fulfillment in my life was actually to be visible.
Yeah.
And I wrote my first book, which was great. And again, it was telling my story, but I didn't have to tell it because I could write it once, someone else could read it.
Yeah.
But the more my book did for me, the more people offered me speaking opportunities. And the first time I ever spoke on stage wasn't planned. I was in the audience and the person on stage knew I was a testimonial. I went, Chloe, actually, can you come up on stage and talk about this? And I was walking on stage, please don't make me speak. And my throat was getting dry and I just had to breathe. But for me, it was that tiny bit. It was almost like a drug of seeing people's reactions.
Yeah.
So that the nerves didn't go. I'm not going to say they did,
Sure.
but being on that stage and sharing my story and the amount that came up to me afterwards saying that was so inspiring, I thought that's a bit of me, and that's where the whole journey started.
Yeah, nice. And my guess is that if you'd been asked beforehand, come and speak at this event, prepare like a little 10 minutes, you'd have been like, absolutely not. Yeah. Sometimes it's good to have like a forcing function sometimes it's good to be put on the spot, chucked in the deep end, because actually you find that you're more capable than you probably realised, I suppose. So you were in a traditional employment situation, taking time off with illness, etc. You started your first business. What was that first business? Tell me about that. What was that all about?
That business was a coaching business to help people who are in the corporate world basically find themselves. Because I had been in the corporate world for so long, qualified very quickly, and became a leader quite young, and realised that so many people was screwed, to be honest.
What was your job in the corporate world? By the way, these podcast episodes are mostly me just being super nosy and finding out more about people, because I don't even know some of this stuff about you, even though we know each other fairly well. What was your corporate role?
I was a chartered accountant.
Okay.
Actually.
You have told me that.
Yeah.
But I refuse to believe it because it sounds really boring. You're not that at all. So you were a chartered accountant.
Yeah. Working
in big accountancy firm.
Yeah, big accountancy firm. So qualified by the age of 21.
Yeah.
Became a director of the global firm by 24. So I became head of compliance projects, all things central operations basically. Yeah. But I just wasn't enjoying it. I saw more and more people sat at the board table just not happy. And I saw mums who were constantly away from their kids and putting their kids to bed and then jumping on a board meeting, and I was like, this is not me. Yeah. And so I decided to start coaching. When I went through my own breakdown, when I came back, I went back into the corporate world for a very short period of time, and I was like, there are so many people who are broken around, and that's when I thought, actually, if I can help some of those people fix themselves. So my actual business was a life coach, and I do this, intentionally. I sort of take this now because I was 26 years old trying to do life coaching. Like, I'd had a life, don't get me wrong, but what I thought I wanted and what I actually wanted were two very different things.
Yeah. So started off the coaching business. What was the first book and how did that come about?
So first book was called Determined and Dangerous. So it came about because I was trying to do a book to monetize my business. Yeah. More automated income streams. I've never been driven by money, but I was driven by automation, and I just wanted results. So I wrote the book, and actually it ended up not being the book that came out. I wrote about half the book thinking this is what's going to help my clients, and then I was writing going, this isn't me again. So I rewrote the whole book and basically took my journals from when I was depressed and rewrote them into a self-help book for other people. Right. So it takes particularly anyone who's had a struggle or maybe feel like there's a gap in their life, which most of the corporate world I experience had, and then take them through overcoming that to then working out what is their true calling, what is their true purpose, how I did that and had turned it into a business.
Here's what's interesting about what you just said. I think what you're saying is that the book itself, when you were trying to write the book, felt like really hard work. And when you actually just tapped into, first of all, something that you'd already created, and then maybe finessed that a little bit, you actually wrote a much better book.
Exactly.
So using your diary, your experience of when you were suffering with mental illness, and I think often that authenticity is what really works. So how long did it take you to write the book after you'd kind of struggled with the first half of it? How long did it take you to write the book?
10 days.
What?
No.
How?
Because
here's the reason I'm asking this question, and I did, by the way, that was not a setup. I did not know the answer to that question. You could have said a year. I didn't know what you were going to say. But here's the reason I want to pursue this is because I think a lot of people that come to our events, that listen to our podcast, either have written a book and it was a painful, long-winded experience, or they haven't written a book because they think it's going to be painful and long-winded, whereas you did it in 10 days. So how did you write a book in 10 days?
And before anyone else thinks it, I didn't spend every hour every day. That's the first myth. I actually only gave myself 2 hours a day. So I set aside, and it's just set a challenge. I have to write at least 2,000 words every single day, no matter what. They can be great words, they can be rubbish words, but I've just got to get it done.
Yep.
And I blocked that time in my diary, and I could not move on to my next meeting until I'd done that. And so sometimes at first, don't get me wrong, the first 2,000 was so slow, and it was like, crap, what am I going to write about? But I started with chapters that I had a lot to say, because then I overcame that, and then it was like turning on a tap.
Yeah.
Once you get in the flow, it just became so much easier. And then I actually originally thought, I'll give myself a month. Even if if I can do that, that'll be amazing. And then when it hit 10 days, I remember thinking, is that enough? Did I write enough?
Yeah.
But I thought, no, do you know what? Put it away, give it to a writer, give it to an editor, see what they think, and go from there.
So when was this? What year was this?
This was 2019.
Okay, so not that long ago, really, in the huge scheme of things. We're recording this February 2023, so 3-4 years ago. So what did you do then? So you've written the book, it took you 10 days. The thing that I think a lot of people that have written books struggle with, that I meet, is like, how do I actually market? How do I promote? How do I get this book to work for me? Because very few authors ever create meaningful amounts of income from the book directly. So what was like you said, the purpose of the book was to essentially create another automated income stream and then support your core business. How did you market it? What was the business model? How did you make it work for you?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. So many people believe that it's going to make them loads of millions, and it never does. It sits in the bookshelf, it doesn't really go anywhere. They just give it away for free and hope for the best. Yeah. So for me, it was about putting it in my funnel. So I was already into funnels. I did a lot of automated income. Yeah. And so my plan was to launch it, get priority lists going, get people really excited, get people on the journey with me. And then I started just speaking at events and giving it out. And then I launched a funnel that would sell it and then offer the next step. So biggest piece of advice anyone listening or watching is, what's next? Yeah. Not just giving a book and saying, give me a call if you have any conversation. What in the book? So first tip, put something in the book that is like a bonus resource. Don't say, you can buy my products at X, because they're never going to do that. So what complementary resource? So for example, I created a toolkit called the Determined and Dangerous Toolkit. In the book, download this, work alongside it. I got their email, I got their name, I got their number, and then offered them the next logical step.
Right, which was?
For me, it was just coaching. So at the time, it was an online course that I created, and it was about the fact that if they got at least halfway through the book, they already know they want a business. So how do they work out what I called then their genius method, getting the next step of their business? Now, ironically, all of that is automated now. I don't teach any of that because I feel like I've progressed in my own career, but it's still there bringing me clients. And some people now will read the book who have already got a successful business, but they feel the same way they did in the corporate world, and now want other help in their business. So it still works.
Yeah, and so since that first book, how many books have you written?
Just one on my own at the moment, 4 I've co-authored.
So you've by the way, that's another thing that we'll talk about in a second. Let's just hold that to one side. So you've written that one on your own in 10 days. You've co-authored, which is another great way of creating a book without having to do it all yourself. Yeah. 4 others, I think you said. Yeah. And how many have you published? Because obviously you've got your publishing company. Inspired by Publishing, which publishes books for authors. So how many of those have you published?
Right now, we've published 23 best-selling books.
Wow, amazing. So 23 best-selling books. What have you found to be the difference that makes the difference when it comes to writing a bestseller? Or is it writing it, or is it marketing it, or is it a combination of the two? What is it that makes a book a bestseller?
Great question. So bestsellers are all about marketing. You can have a one-page book with absolutely no value in it, and you can still get a bestseller. That's why I'm not a massive fan of the concept of a best-selling book. I have best-selling books and I created them, but it's what you do with the bestseller status that makes the difference.
Yes.
So that, for me, I'd say it's the marketing. It's about getting sales. It's about getting people wanting to buy your book.
Yeah. What about title? How important is that?
Again, I don't think title is as a bestseller.
Yeah.
Title will get you the sales that will get you the money through the door. Because what most people do to become bestseller is you want to get as many sales as possible in a short amount of time.
Yes.
Which most of the time come from people who already know you. Yeah. So you can probably ask people that bought my book what the title was, and they probably wouldn't have known it.
No, they bought it because you'd written it,
exactly.
And they wanted to support you, and they were interested in learning.
Yeah.
And I think the key from what you said is it's how do we get as many book sales as possible in a short time period as possible. Rather than, it's not really about longevity, it's about that short period of time. So what tips would you give for somebody who's written a book, wants to get bestseller status? What can they do? What tactics can they utilise in order to make sure that they sell as many books as possible in a short period of time?
Yeah. So biggest tip is to make your launch of your book everybody else's business too. So get everyone, it's a bit like having a live event but not really having a live event. Yeah. Set a day and time that you're going to launch the book and make sure everybody knows about it. They need to take action at that day and time. Why? So make a big event out of it is the first step. And the second one is give them a reward as a basis for it. So we always recommend having loads of bonuses. If they buy within the first 24 hours, email you the receipt and give them gifts.
Did you do this on the first book?
Yeah.
What did you give? Because actually there'll probably be quite a few people watching this, listening to this, who are coaches, who have written a book or are writing a book. And by the way, even if you've written a book, could you still relaunch and use this strategy to get bestseller status?
You can.
Right? So, give us some examples of what kind of gift bonuses you gave away to reward people for buying on that day.
So you can piggyback on what you've already got. So extra lead magnets. Yeah. I used to do webinars quite a lot, so I would give them a VIP ticket to a webinar, and then I just let them come in an hour before, and I do Q&A before the main webinar. Given digital copies of the book. So a really good one is obviously people buy the book, but they've got to wait for Amazon to ship it. So saying to them, as a thank you, download your PDF version that you can print, annotate, because also on Kindle you can't do that. You can't print it. So giving people that if they buy a copy, meet and greets, in-person tickets, anything that's going to get them. Biggest tip I know now, I didn't know then, get them to a live event with you and get the book as a ticket. So get them to bring the book, because then other people will see you have loads of people having the book, and it massively will scale your results.
Nice, love it. And so I mentioned it briefly, having an existing book that you're relaunching. What are the differences? Because I know that there's a lot of people in our community that have been to our Expert Empires events that have written books and maybe not done as good a job of marketing as they could have. So what are the differences when you're relaunching an existing book versus launching a new one? Yeah,
so it's a very similar marketing strategy, but you need to change the book. You cannot do it with a current book you're already doing. So do a second edition, add either a prologue, like a chapter at the beginning which has something to do with the changes, or something at the end, or give a bonus extra within the book. So a second edition, so that people want to get it, because then if they've already got a copy of the book, they're still going to get another one because they don't want to miss out on the bonuses. And the same process. Do a priority list, give them bonuses for buying, and just really market it for that particular day and time.
Great. We mentioned earlier, I want to come back to it, co-authoring. Yeah. So what would be some of the reasons why you said you've written one book on your own and 4 co-authored. So my guess is you prefer the co-authored model, since you've done it 4 times more. What are the main differences between? Why would you co-author rather than just write a book on your own? Yeah. What's your thinking around that?
So the real reason is 3 things. Time, so it's obviously a lot quicker to co-author a book.
Quicker than 10 days? You're obviously big on time, right?
Yeah. So definitely quicker because you only have to write less words.
Yeah.
Second one is more visibility because there's all the co-author books I've done I've also published. So 16 co-authors. I'm one of 16 people that are going to promote that book.
Yes.
So you get way more positioning and way more visibility. And the third one is authority. You can piggyback other people's association. So in all of our books, we've had some people that don't have a big audience, but we have some people that have a really big audience and really big authority. So you become associated with them. So for us, it's been a no-brainer to continue doing that.
I suppose really it's another way of utilising joint ventures, collaborations, partnerships, which I've done a lot of. You know, when we have an event like Expert Empires, and we have lots of different people speaking on stage, it's similar. I guess a similar thing, just done in a different way, different environment. It makes a lot of sense if the way to get bestseller status is to sell as many books as possible in a short period of time, and you've got 16 people all marketing, promoting the book. That's 16 times as much activity. And therefore you're more likely to move up to bestseller status. You mentioned earlier, once you've got bestseller status, it's like, what do you do with that? Yeah. So because I'm going to play devil's advocate, it seems like everyone's written a best-selling book now. So like, let's pretend I'm a super skeptic, which I'm not, but let's pretend I am. Like, why does it matter?
Yeah, and do you know what, Nick, I've been asking myself that question for years, because my pet hate is you can actually become a bestseller by buying 100 of your own books on loads of different Amazon accounts and leave them in your garage.
Yeah.
And there are people that teach that, which drives me mad, because being a best-selling author for me is not about an ego thing. It's not about, you don't put a poster up in your bedroom and go to bed sleeping about that, right?
Yeah.
It's about what you do with it. So for me, it's about marketing that, using that as your authority, but using it to get more sales in your business. So getting published and getting paid, not just being a published best-selling author.
Yeah, and I know that you, like you mentioned earlier, once you became a best-selling author, you then started to get, in your business, like mine, more speaking gigs. Yeah. But of course, there might be various different business models and types that are watching or listening. But how did becoming a best-selling author lead to speaking gigs for you, or maybe with the 20 odd other bestsellers that you published? Like, how have they used their bestseller status, not just to get speaking gigs, but to build their businesses in other ways?
Yeah. So first thing is, it would, anyone who's already around you that's maybe on the fence, it'll tip them over.
Yeah.
So I've got a client that we did his book called AJ doing that, and his book was how to.
I know AJ.
I do.
Google pay-per-click specialist. Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool.
So,
there you go, AJ. Got a little shout out on the podcast.
So he wrote a book called How to Win Customers with Google Ads.
Yeah.
So he does do speaking, but didn't really want to. But there were people who were on the fence of working with him who didn't really understand the importance of it. They didn't even read the book. They just saw he had a best-selling book, booked a course with him, and he hit 5 figures on just that book sales from the book within the first week of launching.
And that's selling courses or services?
Consultancy.
Consultancy.
Yeah. So you can use it for consultancy. Obviously, we do a lot of speaking gigs. So one of the biggest ways you can monetize it isn't actually necessarily by calls to action. It's just adding it to your website, adding it to your funnels, adding it to your social media. Talk about it, because then there's a perceived status in having a best-selling book. People think, oh, Nick must know what he's talking about if he's done this.
Yeah, it's similar to, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine yesterday. We went out for lunch, and he was asking me about the podcast. And he was like, well, are you still doing the podcast? And because we haven't spoken that much recently, and like, how's it working for you? And I went, look, I cannot show you on a spreadsheet the return on investment or return on time invested on the podcast. I can't say that by doing, every time we do 10 episodes, it generates this much in sales. But anecdotally, I can tell you that, and again, it doesn't matter what kind of product or service you sell, anecdotally, I can tell you that there are people who come to our events and purchase our mastermind programs, things like that, and they consistently say that they've been listening to the podcast regularly, or that they've binged a load of episodes in the week leading up to the event. And in my mind, that just dramatically enhances the trust, the rapport, the connection, the likelihood of them somebody becoming a paying client or a customer. And I think what you're saying with AJ is an example of that. Even the perception that he's got a best-selling book, I certainly hear that a lot when people don't realise I've got a podcast, and I say I haven't. Like, to me, I mean, look, let's face it, anyone can start a podcast. It doesn't really cost anything. You can get the equipment pretty cheap. It's just putting a bit of time in to create the episodes and learning how to upload them to the various platforms. Anyone can do that, but most people don't. I guess what you're saying is anyone can write a book, and actually anyone can become a best-selling author, but most people don't.
Exactly.
And so it gives you that higher level of authority and profile.
Exactly. And even now, I don't know if we're going to go into the technical stuff, but with AI that's coming out, that you can write your whole book and literally never need to be involved, and people still don't, because there is a.
I'm going to play devil's advocate. Do we not think that using, let's say, ChatGPT, for example, to write a book and then putting your name on it, morally, ethically, what do you think? What's your opinion?
I couldn't agree with you more. I think people that write their whole book on ChatGPT, one, you don't, as much as you do legally own the asset, if people quote you on it, you're not going to know. Like the amount of times I'll be on stage at an event and I'll go to the bathroom and someone's in the toilet going, oh my God, what you said in chapter 24 was so resonating with me. If I don't know what I said in chapter 24, I'd be like, what did I say again? Yeah. So I do think there's a massive ethics thing, but also like with technology, I will bet in about 6 to 12 months, Amazon will have checkers like that and will get flagged. So for me, the way because I'm not going to lie and say don't use it, like we both have discussed it, I do use ChatGPT and other AI software because I'm up for learning. But for me, it's about the idea generation. Yeah. It's about filling the gaps. So if I've got a 3-step process, I'll ask ChatGPT for say 7 steps and go, what else am I not seeing? Because we delete things and we all think differently. There are loads of different ways people process information. If I only write my book in the way I process information, I'm not helping everyone. Yeah, makes sense. And look, I'm certainly not anti-AI or anti-ChatGPT. I think it's the fact is these tools are only going to become more intelligent, they're only going to become more widely used, and if we don't utilise them in some way, shape or form, then we're going to get left behind. So I'm not anti using these tools. I think I'm just questioning when it comes to creating content. Well, by the way, this is the same whether it's a book or any form of written content, and of course in time there'll be audio content and there'll be video content that can be made using AI as well. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that. I think what we need to think about is if you're writing a book, a proper book, and you haven't written a word of it yourself, I would say, do what you want to do, but there are consequences to that. In the same way that there are consequences to writing it yourself from scratch, because it's going to take you a lot longer. And if you do it the old way of writing a book, then it could take you months and sometimes years. And if you do it the new, smart way, using your checklist and your tools and things like that, then it could be as little as 10 days, as you did. So I think you've got to do what's right for you. I guess I'm just challenging the use of AI a little bit when it comes to creating books and content. Also, of course, we've spoke about this at Mastermind recently, but I feel like really there is a skill required to using AI for content creation, because like platforms like ChatGPT will only give you answers to the questions you ask it. They will only respond to the commands you give, and so I think in time, as these platforms, these tools evolve, then they'll become more intelligent and we'll get better at using them. And so it might be a way to shorten the process of creating content. So what would you say to someone who says that they're thinking about writing a book, but they feel like they've got a book inside them, but they struggle with the creative process, and they've got the inspiration, but maybe not the information yet to write a book? What would you say to someone thinking that way? I get asked this a lot actually, especially the inspiration over information piece. So I always say to people, as long as you're an expert in something, then you have got information inside you, just don't have to get it out of you yet. So work out who it is you want to help as the first step, and what you help them with. And the first thing I would recommend, write 10 pieces of advice to that person.
Okay, nice.
Any 10 things. Those 10 things can end up being your 10 chapters in your book, or possibly 20, 30, depending. Because once you start thinking, you'll think of other things. You go, oh, actually, step 4 actually has a 0.5 or whatever, 4.1, 2, 3, 4. So start there, get your juices flowing, and then ask around. Third tip, ask other clients, what did I help you with? what golden nugget did you take away from what I shared? And they'll probably start helping you write the book more than you going blank.
Yeah, it's great advice. Great advice. Tools, resources have you got for our audience to support them in writing their book, in being better at getting it marketed, bestseller status? Like, how can you help our Expert Empires community? What have you got for us?
So I'm actually in the process of writing another book that I'm currently writing, and it's day 4, so we'll see if I can get it done in the 10 days as soon as it
No
does.
pressure.
Which is called Get Published, Get Paid.
Mm-hmm.
However, I also have a cheat sheet that's attached to that, so the cheat sheet's ready, so if anybody wants to get that, then we can just share the link.
Yeah, the link will be in the show notes on podcast platform, and I guess we'll put it in the description on the YouTube channel, Jav. So you can get the cheat sheet for Get Published, Get Paid, and of course keep your eye out for the book, which, given the fact that Chloe tends to write in less than 10 days, should be out very soon. The final thing I want to ask you, which is not related to any of this, you're, as I said right at the start, international speaker. You're going to be speaking at Expert Empires very soon. I also know that you've got a business called Queens in Business that you and I have worked on together in Mastermind. So you're championing like female entrepreneurship. Why do you think there are so few world-renowned female speakers?
You didn't warn me about this question.
No, I didn't. So I didn't want you to come up with like a prepared answer.
Yeah. I
want to hear your opinion because, I've been running large-scale events for many, many years, and it still now frustrates me that, when I look at headline speakers, there's like 10 times more male potential headline speakers, and I pride myself on creating, certainly, ensuring that we've got the people on stage are representative of our audience, and our audience tends to be about 50-50 male-female. Why do you think at the top end of the speaker market there are so few female speakers?
So I'm going to give my honest answer. However, I've got to say that this is not coming from a place of victim mode, but what I would say is there's a lot of women in history, generations, that have been pushed down and not been allowed to do things. And the reason I'm championing it is because I want women to stop staying in that victim mode and allowing that BS to continue, because it's learned behaviour, in my view. And the reason I'm so passionate about this, whether it's speaking, writing books, is that, no offence, no matter what gender you associate as, everybody is as good as each other, and it doesn't matter whether you're male, female, both, neither, it doesn't matter. What matters is the expertise you have. But to answer your question, what I think has happened in the past is it's been easy for women to not speak. It's been easy for us not to put ourselves out there. And so for a lot of women, and even there are some incredible experts that will be great on a webinar, be great on a Facebook Live. The minute you put them in front of an audience, they panic because they've never had to have that level of judgment, that level of vulnerability. And when I first became a speaker, I was exactly as you, like there was hardly any women in there. And I'll be honest, I got speaking gigs because I was the only female speaker. And I was the token speaker that they put on their stages. And people say to me, women, does it not bother you that the only reason you get the speaking gig is because you're female? And my response was, I don't care what's given me the opportunity, I'm going to show them why they will keep giving me the opportunity. And the challenge I've got for women is that the more we play small, we're giving more permission to other women to stay small. And I actually think that for women, we need to actually step out and go, right, yes, that's been in the past, let it pass, and show why we should keep being given opportunities. And to go on the other side, to gents, guys out there, keep giving women the opportunities, keep encouraging it, because the more we can step away from what we've experienced, stop playing that same BS story, that's the past. Let's create the new future without sounding really cliche.
Well, cliches are normally cliches because they're true. Thank you. I appreciate you. I was putting you on the spot. I wanted to ask your opinion on it. As a multi-award-winning international female speaker, I had to take the opportunity to ask the question. So thank you for joining us on the Empire Builders podcast. Make sure those that are listening, watching, use the link in the show notes, in the description, to get your Get Published, Get Paid cheat sheet, and keep an eye out because Chloe Bisson is going to be bringing the fire on stage at Expert Empires very soon.
Can't wait. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.